Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I have recently been organizing the photos in my computer, and while organizing my different files, I came across my early film photography, and I saw all of the mistakes I made at the beginning, some of which actually haunt me until today. So maybe you've just recently started film photography or are thinking about getting into it, and this is why I'm making this video, because hopefully it can help you avoid some of these very common mistakes. Unlike digital photography, when it comes to analog, you might actually only find out that you made these mistakes at the moment of getting your films developed. And trust me, there is nothing sadder than thinking about each and every picture that you took on that film roll and then getting back an empty one or a completely ruined set of exposures. Also, unlike digital, film photography mistakes will end up costing you a lot of your hard-earned money. So without any further ado, let's get right into the first mistake that I made, and that is choosing the wrong film stock. The amazing thing today is that there are so many different film stocks available to us photographers. However, being faced with this huge choice can actually be pretty overwhelming for a beginner. So it's important to understand some of the basics of film stocks, because choosing your film stock can actually be the make or break moment for your whole roll. Some film stocks are more beginner friendly than others, so if you're only just starting out, I would advise you to stray away from the more experimental types of film. You'll have a lot of time to have fun with those later on. One of the things you have to keep in mind when choosing your film stock is its color balance. Some film stocks are balanced for daylight and other ones are balanced for artificial tungsten light. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're going to be shooting outside, you should go for a daylight balanced film stock, and if you're going to be shooting indoors with artificial light, then you should go for tungsten balanced films. This photo, for example, was taken on a daylight balanced film. However, the light available in that moment was artificial, and you can see that the picture is pretty yellowy. Some of these things can be fixed later on in Lightroom. However, it is always easier to start with the correct basis. And the second essential thing to really keep in mind is the film stock's ISO. ISO is the film's speed, and slower film stocks are ideal for when you have an abundance of light, whilst higher speed films like 800 ISO and above are going to do great even in lower light settings. So if you're going for indoor photography or night photography, for example, I definitely recommend that you reach for a higher ISO film stock, and you should be golden. Once you have chosen the correct film stock, it is now time to load it into your camera. And this is important because incorrectly loading your film could result in you not getting any photos out of it whatsoever. An important rule or suggestion is to avoid harsh light when loading your film. Film stocks are light sensitive, some more than others, but it is always going to be your safest bet to just stay out of direct sunlight when putting your film roll into your camera. If you load your film in direct sunlight, something that I have repeatedly done, you will end up finding light leaks in your photographs. While light leaks are not inherently bad and at times can be a very nice artistic addition to your photographs, most of the time you will not be happy to see them. On my earlier rolls, countless photos are filled with these light leaks, and since they are not controlled, you don't know where they're going to end up and how they're going to affect your photo. Next, you might want to be careful that your film is actually correctly wound on the spool, and make sure that it is well attached to the little teeth that you'll find on your spool. This has happened to me before. I threw my film in, closed my camera, wound it once or twice, then I went out, took a bunch of pictures, and when it was time to unwind the film, I could feel no resistance and I was a little thrown off. So after a lot of hesitation, I opened my camera and I found out that I hadn't taken a single picture on this film and my roll was completely empty. This is because it hadn't caught on inside the mechanism and I was just taking shots on an empty camera. What I recommend you do when loading your film is wind it a couple of times before you close the back of your camera, and even though this might mean losing the first 1 or 2 exposures, it is definitely so much better than losing the entire roll. Another mistake that is linked to loading and unloading your camera is opening the back of your camera before rewinding your film. Now this has happened to me a couple of times because to unwind my film I have to lift this lever, unwind it, then lift it up a little higher, and that is going to cause my camera back to open up. So once or twice I rushed it a little too much, I lifted the lever too high, and my camera door just snapped open before I had unwound the film. If you do this, what's going to happen is light is going to infiltrate your undeveloped film, and this is going to damage quite a few of your exposures. If you're at the end of your film roll, chances are your first exposures will still be protected because the film winds onto itself, and so the beginning of the film is going to be protected by itself because it's just covered up by rolls and rolls of film. If you're halfway through your film, then the exposures that are still inside the film canister will not be affected because they are protected from sunlight by the canister. However, chances are that if you open your camera, light is going to penetrate and ruin a bunch of your photos. The amount of time that the back is open is also going to affect how ruined or not your photos will be. The longer it's open, the more light is going to get in. And the light sensitivity of your film is also going to play a role because some films are extremely light sensitive and the damage is pretty much done in a second. Now, when it comes to unloading your film, you might think it's pretty straightforward. I thought so too, but once I made the silly mistake of not looking at what I'm doing and unwinding the film in the wrong direction. Now, this is quite a silly mistake because on my camera there is an actual arrow which shows you the direction in which you should unwind the film, so you'd think it's foolproof, but it's not. Especially in my case. The worst part is that I felt more resistance than I usually feel when unwinding my film, but stubbornly I just kept forcing it, and at the end I had scrunched up my entire roll of Portra 400, which is not a cheap film stock. So for God's sake, look at what you're doing when unwinding your film. You might think you're done, nothing else can happen. Trust me, it can. Another common mistake that I want to point out, even though it might sound obvious, is to keep an eye on your settings. At the beginning, I used my camera on pretty much a semi-automatic setting, so I got a little too comfortable, and I didn't always check if any of my settings have shifted, if I accidentally touched the wheel or something like that. So what had happened was that instead of having my camera on aperture priority mode, I had moved to maximum shutter speed. This means that my shutter was extremely quick, and it didn't allow for enough light to enter the camera, so painfully all of my photos were really dark. Some were just outright gray because there wasn't enough light within that quick shutter speed for a photo to be taken correctly. This was particularly painful because if you've watched my videos before, you might know of Luna, my family's dog, and I had shot this entire roll when she was a tiny little puppy. She was 3 weeks old, and those photos were just something I was really looking forward to treasuring for a very long time. I swear I almost cried because Luna was growing really fast and she was twice the size by the time I found out what I did. Another setting to keep in mind is your ISO in camera, because when you buy your film stock, it has a certain ISO, and most cameras are going to require you to select the correct ISO so that the film and the camera can work together. Depending on what film stock you're using, you can more or less get away with overexposing or underexposing it. It's really going to depend on your film stock's exposure latitude. But again, it is something that could damage your entire roll if too overexposed or too underexposed. If this happens to you, I strongly recommend you tell your lab about it when you give them your rolls for development, because they might be able to fix it a little bit. Sometimes it's salvageable, other times it's a mistake to learn from. So when loading a new roll of film, don't get overexcited like I do myself a lot of the time. Just take a minute to breathe. Do it all correctly. It's gonna save you money. It's gonna save you a headache. Another mistake that I made is quite personal to me. It might not be the case for others, but the first camera I actually bought was a reusable plastic camera because I wanted to save money. But what happened in the end was that the camera was not a good quality. I made a video about it, so you can find that on my channel. But this almost discouraged me from continuing film photography because the results I got were just really underwhelming. If you want to get into film photography, I strongly suggest that you invest a little bit into a good point and shoot or into a good SLR. Trust me, it's gonna be worth it to have more control over your photos. Plus, to make good photos, you really don't need a Leica. You can buy a cheap point and shoot off eBay, but I think it really is the best way to dip your toes into film photography and to be in control of the whole process. Now here's another common mistake that can happen in film photography, one I didn't commit myself, thankfully, because I was always very careful about this, and that is storing your film correctly. Film stocks are expensive, so you don't want to throw your money out the window and damage a film roll that you just bought. The idea is to protect your film from heat damage by storing it in the fridge if you can. And another thing that I really want to instill upon you that may not seem so important, but is in fact really going to affect your results, is knowing your lab and choosing a quality lab for your development and for your scans. I know that taking your film stock to be developed in the drugstore might be the easiest option. What I am also guilty of is taking my film to a lab that is quicker, but not necessarily better. And trust me, the lab's experience and the care with which they handle your film is really going to be impactful. So don't hesitate to check reviews or to find a lab that really is going to provide you the highest quality scans and development, and then stick to it if you can, because the way your film stock is handled is a huge part of the process. Now I know that I have laid a lot of things on you, maybe created some new fears and anxieties. I really hope I didn't. At the end of the day, you're probably gonna make some of these mistakes. They happen to everybody, so don't overthink it, because my biggest regret in analog photography, hands down, are the pictures that I didn't take. So let me know in the comments if any of these things have happened to you, or perhaps different mistakes that you made when starting out film photography. Please subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the video and want to learn more. On my channel, I review a lot of film stocks, so this could potentially help you out a little when choosing a film stock. I always include sample photos so that you know what to expect. And most importantly, get out there, take some pictures, have fun with it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.